I almost got sent to jail, almost got the building burned down, almost had the roof collapse. Didn't realize my landlord was having an affair with my chef's daughter. What else happened? And then at the end of it, I never got paid.
Price tag's still on there. And the name brand of the shirt.
Around 2001, I was introduced to a business program that I joined, and I had been thinking of going back to school for some time. I went to USC, I graduated. I actually studied politics and communication. I never formally studied business. And I ended up I had been working as a bank teller and learning banking a little bit during college. And then right after that, I worked in the insurance industry, State Farm Insurance. And I just didn't really find any of them to be desirable for me. I made a lot of good friends and I'm still friends with, but it wasn't a career path that I was interested in. And I had been debating I could go back to school and get my MBA, study business because I was interested in entrepreneurship. I could go, or I could just go back to work for my family and learn it hands on. What I noticed is my family's members that never left the business were living a much nicer lifestyle than I was. They had more disposable income, whereas my wife's a teacher. So I was right after I got married. So now we're actually 97. Good Friday, 1997, as a matter of fact, was the day I went back to work for the family. And learned a lot of life lessons, got a lot of time to spend with my dad because I hadn't seen him for a bit. I would work Sundays sometimes in the business, just sit in the office with him because he's like, you should, even though you're doing other things and I'm proud of you for all that, I think you should still kind of have your hands somewhere involved in the business just in case, you ever want to come back. And I wasn't planning to, but I was realizing that even with the banking job and the insurance job, and my wife was a teacher, the idea of buying a home had kind of become a pipe dream. I just couldn't see how we could put enough money together to do that. So coming back to work for the family business in 97 actually increased my income, opened some new possibilities. The bad part about it was I'm working nights, holidays, and weekends, and my wife's a teacher, and she's basically working, normal hours Monday through Friday. So we didn't see each other very much, and it was kind of a bummer. But it did open a lot of new opportunities. And then sadly, so my daughter's born 1999 July. I'm at the work. I'm still working with the family. That wasn't the sad part. That was actually awesome, Sophia. But 2 months later, my dad tragically dies, very unexpectedly, passes away. And I was sitting there with that. It was a real shocker because I used to go to the gym with him in the mornings. And this is one of those days I did not go to the gym with him. And he actually died on the elliptical at the gym. And I didn't go because our 2-month-old daughter was having her first shots, and I wanted to make sure I was there with her. And so it was pretty tragic. And I was thinking about, like, what did my dad really want me to do? He kept saying, don't come to work here, go to college and do something else. So yet here I am. And I do feel like I'm sort of getting my MBA program, but I think I need to reconsider my future. So I enrolled in this business program in 2001, now we're 2001. He died in 99. And what I was thinking of doing is I had this idea to open a concept based on what made us popular selling basically our shrimp fajitas. And I tested in some different ways. And I went and I took over our Wilmington location at the suggestion of one of my family members, my aunt, who's also passed away, my dad's sister. And she goes, why don't you go see what you could do there? Go check it out. And the family was supportive. So I did. I kind of relocated into Wilmington, which is just 10 minutes away. And it wasn't like a big deal, but we had a small restaurant there that there was a lot of potential I saw. So I worked it and I worked it and I worked it. And I thought, this concept's great. I bet we could create more of these and maybe that could become a franchise opportunity. Our customer base is pretty entrepreneurial. We have a really loyal family customer base. I bet we could create this concept, shrink it down, license it out, and that could be, an opportunity. It was an idea I had. And I've been studying, now I'm back in the school, I'm studying business at a place called now it's called the AJI Advantage or AJI.com. And as I studied business, and I'm still in this program now studying business, I started to see some opportunities. So, but I had a hard time moving forward with my family. It's like, let's do this. And we want to try it this way. We want to try it that way. It was like we just kept spinning in circles and getting nowhere. So one day I'm sitting in the Wilmington office and I noticed this card. I thought I threw it in the trash, but it landed on the floor. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. What is this? And I pick it up and I call the number and it's this lady was trying to reach me. She goes, I don't know if you're interested in opening a restaurant, but there's this place in Carson. I represent as the property manager and the owner of the restaurant. He's decided he wants to sell the restaurant. He's going to still own the property, but he just doesn't want to run the restaurant anymore. And he's willing to sell it for like, I think it was $25,000. And at the time, everybody had all this equity in their house because the housing market was exploding. This is going back to now we're actually fast forwarding to 2003. Okay, so I've been testing and experimenting and doing different things, running the Shamrock facility. I'm studying business. I'm building my network. I'm looking at what works, what doesn't. I have this background of, banking, insurance that's sort of been helping me out. So I think I'm going to try this out. So I had equity in my house, wrote a $25,000 check for my equity, and boom, I'm a restaurant owner. I went and told the family, guys, I'm done. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm leaving. They weren't super happy about it. Some people in my family, I don't think, talked to me for quite a while. I didn't really understand why. I was just leaving to try my own thing. I was off the payroll. I just wanted to, I wanted to be responsible for my own decisions and see if I could do this or not. And it was a disaster. Oh my God. So I opened this place. I remember the night I transitioned from family business to business owner, my wife said, I don't think I've ever watched you sleep so soundly. And I'm like, I just don't have to worry about all this other stuff anymore. But I didn't realize what I was going to have to worry about. Finding the employees, figuring out pricing. How does a point of sale system work? How am I financing that? And then, by the way, my wife's pregnant, about to have our third child, which she was born February 20th, and we opened the restaurant like January. And there was a bunch of complications. And my wife was in and out of the hospital. She had health issues after the third pregnancy. We still had two young daughters that were like 3 and 4 at the house. I'm trying to run back and forth to be there, help with the kids, open this new restaurant. I think I gained 50 pounds in stress. I couldn't really figure out, even though we got really good accolades, people loved it, just couldn't really figure out how to get to profitability. As a matter of fact, I didn't get paid. There was no money to pay me for over a year. So now I'm paying myself out of equity and trying to pay bills out of credit cards and trying to negotiate that. Then it gets even worse. It rains. I go to one of these business conferences because I'm still involved. I'm still in the business school, and my staff's calling me saying, "Hey, the roof's leaking, and it's starting to collapse." I'm like, "What?" So I get back, and there was electricity shooting out of the power box. Edison shows up and says, "You're stealing power." I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just the tenant." Well, apparently the landlord, building owner, found some way to bypass the power box to power some other places that he owned on the property. I didn't know anything about this, and it made sense. He goes, "So you're telling me this outlet and this outlet are bypassing the meter, this free electricity?" I had no idea, but it makes sense because I couldn't figure out why he had set up his restaurant kitchen the way he did. So inefficient. So we almost had a fire, and the rain basically almost caused an electrical fire while collapsing the roof. So the wife shows up to the landlord, basically says, "I'm taking everything over. He's having an affair with your chef's daughter, and I'm done with him." So it was all this crazy drama. And I just couldn't for the life of me make the business work. And then on top of all this, two other crazy things happen, right? The mayor starts coming in regularly because City Hall's across the street. And he starts telling me, "Yeah, eminent domain, I think we're just going to take all this property back and redevelop it." I'm like, "I just opened. Are you serious?" And that actually ended up happening after I left. And then the other crazy part of it was, we had Nuch Trutanich on here recently as a guest. Well, his brother Dominic is an attorney. And the reason I knew that is because when we had one of our very first shipments of raw oysters come in, these oysters were tagged to be so when you have live oysters, the health department requires that you have a little piece of paper hanging that warns everybody, if you eat these raw, you could die. But these particular oysters that I would buy from the Gulf Coast didn't require that because they had sort of like the top secret, whatever, patented pasteurization process that killed all the bacteria. Our oyster provider didn't realize when they saw Ungaro, and they just assumed this must be going to the original fish market because that's where I used to order them to. And so my father-in-law, who's helped me out at the time, goes to pick up the oysters because they went to the wrong location, brings them to us, box falls apart, paperwork's not in there. Turns out it all went into the mail, which went to my house because I'm home trying to take care of the babies and all this other stuff. Health department comes in, sees the oysters, wants to know where's the box and where's the tags. Somebody shows them a random tag that wasn't our tag. It was actually the one that requires the health warning sign that I didn't have because they weren't my oysters. Those were the oysters my family was selling in the other restaurants that I was no longer part of. So I go all the way. The health department calls me in for a meeting. The head of the health department, and he looks at me and goes, "Well, this is this is a crime. I have to send this to court. It's misdemeanor, possible jail time." And I go, "Listen, you know me, you know our family, you know I've been selling cases of these. Right? I know what the rules are. Those were not the oysters that required that. I have the tag here." And he goes, "That's too late." So I had to hire Nucci's brother Dominic Chitanis to represent me, and we were in and out of court for months until finally he happened to know the opposing counsel from playing basketball with him in the past and had a conversation with him, looked at how ridiculous the entire thing was, and it was dismissed. So I almost got sent to jail, almost got the building burned down, almost had the roof collapse, didn't realize my landlord was having an affair with my chef's daughter. What else happened? And then at the end of it, I never got paid. So I ultimately sold the restaurant to another restaurant owner. And it turned out the city did come in and took it all away and put apartment buildings there. So it was a life lesson. I learned a lot. I gained a lot of weight. What I did produce out of that was interesting is I had friends that were in medical sales. My friend Leonard specifically came to me and he goes, if you could create a catering offer, I can get a lot of business to you. So what really ended up happening is I had created Ungaro catering. It wasn't my plan. It was like a survival move. And what we did was we took all these sort of recipes that I had or that were family recipes, and we created them into a corporate catering offer. And because of the location of this restaurant that I had was freeway close to all the major freeways, we could get like to Pasadena, we can get to Long Beach, Huntington Beach, LA, all the major hospitals where his job was selling to. So we sold a ton of fajitas. We do a bunch of holiday turkeys and tri-tips during this time of the year, like the holiday season. We would do. We had a Mexican buffet. We created these. There wasn't pizza and it wasn't sandwiches like most of the reps were bringing in. We actually created these full meals that were like different and affordable and worked with the reps' budgets. And we accepted American Express too, which allowed them to expense it through their accounts. So that was pretty cool. And then the restaurant, I had to shut it all down, but these guys still wanted to place orders with me. And I'm like, well, how am I going to do this? So I went to my family, came back to work for the fish market, went to the family, and it was kind of a disaster because I'd lost so much money at this point. I was this close to having to claim bankruptcy. But some friends that had been through similar situations in their life kind of coached me about, well, you can make this offer to the bank and you can do this. And so we put the house up for sale, and that was June of 2006. So it was literally $2,000 upside down. We were probably the first home in foreclosure, but I couldn't afford the mortgage anymore. And the bank wouldn't take it. They waited until it went to the court steps, right? So now it's $250,000 upside down my home. And I'm already out of it. I found a rental. I moved out. I took care of the house. We were just trying to survive at this point. And ultimately, the bank said, listen, we're just going to let this buyer take it. We're going to take the $250,000 loss, but it's going to show up as taxable income for you. And I didn't care because I'd lost more than that on the restaurant. So it was a wash for me on the tax part of it. And we rented the house. I still had this corporate catering thing going on in the background. So I went back to work for the family and I said, I'll come back here and I'll work nights and weekends and holidays. If I could use the kitchens we have here in the morning to keep my corporate catering business going, I'll give you 50% of the revenue. So I'm like, hey, that's fair. Let's do that. So we did that, avoided bankruptcy. I kept doing this corporate catering thing. Man, I was working 100 hours a week. It was insane to try to dig out of this hole we had created. We moved into a rental in the same neighborhood. The kids were actually excited because now we had a pool, which we didn't have before. They were still in the same schools, still with the same friends. So their life was mildly interrupted for the best. And the corporate catering thing kind of worked out. And eventually what I did was I had the idea that, what I could do is I could diversify the menu by working with some of the restaurants in the area that I know. So I went to my friends at Busy Bee Sandwich in San Pedro. I went to my friend John that had, there's Big Nick's Pizza and all these different like restaurants in town. And Sorrento's was another one, and Hot Off the Grill, which my friend George Stavros owned. And I asked them all to create meal packages for me that could feed 10 to 30 people or more. And I would say, I'm just going to order this package. Just tell me what the price is. And I would send a driver, someone that worked for us and needed extra time to go to one of these restaurants, pick these packages up, Then my brothers had bought an apartment building, had an extra garage. So I rented their garage from them for like, I don't know, $150 a month. And I stocked it with an old refrigerator that I found for $100 and then a bunch of gorilla racks. And on the racks, I would have plastic bags, these cardboard boxes that were insulated, all the different pans you would need. And then the refrigerator is always filled with soda. So the package would come through. They'd go to the restaurant to pick up whatever the food. They'd go to the garage, get the drinks, get the utensils, get the bags. And I had these insulated cardboard boxes that the food pans could fit in to keep them hot for 2 hours. And then they would just basically food, garage, drop food, leave. And I managed the entire thing through text until gas prices went up to $6 and everyone's budget got cut. And I was like, I think this is a blessing in disguise. So I shut it all down, adjusted my hours back for my family, and been there since. So that's the story of Mike trying to do it on his own. But I'll tell you, when I did go back to work for the family, one of the things that I noticed was really interesting is my aunt, that was kind of a champion, took this for me in the background, suddenly passed away. And I was sitting there at her desk going, man, I can't believe I'm back here again. I felt like such a failure after this restaurant thing failed. I didn't do the banking thing. The insurance thing wasn't that great. What did my college education get me? And all this other stuff. And as I sat there at her desk, trying to figure out what she was doing to help my sister out, could you help us? You're the only one who went to college. Maybe you can figure out what she was doing. I realized like, oh, well, this is a banking issue. And I worked at a bank for a while. This is what we have to do here. Oh, this is an insurance issue. I worked at an insurance company. This is what I have to do. Oh, this is accounting. We need to get QuickBooks and some other things. We don't have any of that stuff here. Like I learned all that when I had the restaurant. And I had this goosebump moment that if I hadn't gone through all these different things and all these different failures, I wouldn't have been in a position to really fill her shoes when she passed away. And as a result, I could see what the business was doing. I had a bigger insight and vision to what our family business really was and how it was growing a work ago. And that ultimately led to me creating the marketing plans we did with Kings of Fish, creating a retail line of frozen meals that we were selling in the grocery stores and online. And ultimately, the visionary for the company and the leader that got us through the pandemic, the eviction, and keeping the brand strength high as a result of all these things I learned and was testing. And by the way, none of that story, there was any social media. It wasn't any social media until after I lost my restaurant. If I had social media when the restaurant was still open in Carson, I think I could have actually made a better run at it. But I learned the importance of storytelling from what I was studying in my business classes, which I'm still in now. I learned about, like I said, I learned about accounting. I learned about insurance. I learned about operations. I learned all these things from the failures that I was able to take in and help the business grow into what it became today. So what did that look like? I came in when we were doing $10 million, and right up until that eviction, we got to 30 million. And we're on track to get to 100 in the next couple of years. So I think it all paid off in the long run. That's my story.